Hello, fellow creeps. Welcome back to another haunting episode of Creepy with Coffee. I'm your storyteller, Kim, and tonight's episode dives deep into the terrifying presence of the lady in red. But not just one. We'll begin with the story of two sisters, one haunted nightly at 3 a.m. by a floating woman in red hovering just inches below the ceiling. What did she want? And what could have happened if she got it? Then we move to a hospital ward where a silent patient dressed in red hid Helmany beneath her pillow and whispered dark incantations into the night. After her death, the ward was never the same again. Two women, one color, and a presence that refuses to leave even in death. Now, before we go to the stories for tonight, first and foremost, I really want to thank Teresa. The first story was actually sent by her. She started in the email saying that, "Hi, Creepy with Coffee. I'm a listener and a big fan of your show. Thank you so much, Teresa. I'd like to share a true story that happened to me and my sisters back in our secondary school days." A haunting that involved a mysterious lady in red and something that affected our whole family. I've enclosed the story below. Thank you for taking time to read it, and I'd be honored if you consider sharing it on the channel. Well, that will be the shout out for Teresa. And Teresa even started the email like how I usually start the story. So once again, thank you very much to Teresa. So, echoing after what Teresa said, now let's get on with her story.
This is Creepy with Coffee.
This happened when my sister and I were still in secondary school. We shared a room. Our beds were only separated by a small side table, close enough to reach out and touch hands in the dark. I was the logical one, the skeptic. I never heard voices or seen shadows. I didn't believe in third eyes or spirits. But my sister was different. It started harmlessly. She told me she had a little friend. She described him as small, with an alien-like body and a head like E.T., if you know the movie. He would follow her around, she said. He never spoke. Just watch. I brushed it off. Kids and their imagination, right? But one night, she looked at me, completely serious, and said, "Jie," which is elder sister, "Jie, he is lying on my bed now. Can you sayang his head?" Sayang as in pet his head. That line, that tone, so calm, so eerie. It froze my blood in my veins. I didn't respond. I didn't move. I just pretended that I didn't hear her. But that was just the beginning. Not long after, things took a darker turn. My sister started saying that she couldn't sleep at night. At exactly 3 a.m. every single night, a woman in red would appear. Always in red. Always floating. At first, she thought it was a dream, but it kept happening like clockwork, and I was there the whole time, just feet away, completely unaware. Then, one night, she whispered to me, "Jie, the lady came again. She looked at your bed and asked me, 'Who is the girl sleeping there? Can I wake her up?'" I turned and stared at her frozen. I told her no, she continued. I told her you wouldn't like me, that you couldn't see her. Well then, from there, things escalated quickly. My sister started crying more. She was always tired, emotionally worn down. One day, she came to me, her voice shaking. "She's following me now." I snapped. I was done watching her suffer. I immediately shouted in the room, daring this lady in red to show herself. "Come out if you're real. Stop hiding." My sister turned pale. Dear, please stop. She's angry now. I barked and said, so what if she's angry? I'm angry too. I demanded my sister to draw the woman. At first, she hesitated, but then gave in. From what she drew sent ice down my spine. It was a woman with upright, wild hair, eyes black and hollow, and her head floating just inches below the false ceiling. She wasn't standing. She was hovering. We ran and left the room immediately. Well, our dad didn't believe us at first, but seeing our faces, pale, shaken, he then called a friend who did energy cleansing. The man walked through the house, muttered some prayers, and burned a few herbs. He said nothing felt dark, but he did a light cleansing just in case. That night, our dad stayed up, just to be sure. At exactly 3 a.m., as the house lay silent, he noticed our dog, Choi, sitting between the master bedroom and our room. Choi was frozen stiff, growling, staring into the empty hallway. But there was nothing there. But Choi saw something. My dad then picked up a Bible, slowly began to recite prayers out loud, and slowly the atmosphere shifted. Lighter, calmer. The next morning, my sister didn't say a word about the lady in red. She never mentioned her again, not once. So sometimes I still wonder, what if my sister said yes to the lady in red? What if the lady in red had come to me? Would I still be here to tell the story? I once had an experience of caring for a Chinese patient, a woman in her early 50s. From the very beginning, there was something different about her. She was extremely quiet, often lost in thoughts, and had a habit of mumbling to herself in a language only she understood. One thing that stood out most was her fondness of the color red. She wore the same red clothing every day, almost like a uniform, as if it meant something. Whenever someone or anyone asked her questions, her replies were brief, one word, maybe two. She never smiled, never engaged in small talk, and strangely enough, she never had visitors, not even once. One day, while her usual nurse, Juliana, not her real name, was tidying the patient's bed while she was away showering, something odd happened. As Juliana adjusted the pillows, several sheets of odd-looking paper slipped out from the inside of the pillowcase. Curious, she bent down to pick them up and froze. They weren't ordinary paper. They were hell money. The kind burned in traditional Chinese funeral rituals, meant as offerings to the dead in the afterlife. Obviously, Juliana was startled. She had never seen them in a hospital setting before, especially hidden in someone's pillow. She immediately called me over to have a look. As I examined the crumpled sheets, a patient from the next bed suddenly spoke up. She had been silently watching us and said in a hushed, nervous voice, "Hey guys, that's black magic, a death offering." We quickly returned the papers to where we found them and decided not to mention it again. But something had already been set in motion. In the days that followed, the Redclad Patient became more volatile. She started rambling louder at night, mostly in Chinese, and began cursing and shouting at unseen things. When we asked her what's wrong, she snapped back, "Someone has invaded my space, touched my things." We assumed she meant someone had broken into her house. But we were wrong, because from then on, every time Juliana came near her, the woman's expression twisted with anger. She stared Juliana down with eyes that seemed unblinking. That's when it hit us. It must have been because Juliana had touched that harmony. Something had been disturbed. I then gave strict orders for the staff to never touch her belongings again. But it only got worse. Every night, she began chanting softly in her bed. Sometimes the sounds were rhythmic like an incantation. Other patients said they often saw her sitting up in bed, hands raised, murmuring to something we all couldn't see. "She's calling something," one of them whispered. She looked like one of those witches you see in all horror films. Sunken eyes, long hair, her mouth always muttering. Whether she was really casting spells or just mentally unwell, we didn't know. But the energy in the ward started to change. You could feel it in the air. Then one morning, she was found dead in her bed. What sent chills down everyone's spine was that her body was discovered not by staff checking her vitals, but by a patient who noticed something was off. When we lifted the blanket, there she was, lifeless, still in red harmony tucked beneath her pillow. A worn cryptic book written in strange symbols no one could recognize lay next to her. When we contacted the family, they responded without shock or sadness. In fact, they said very little except, "We will come claim the body as soon as possible." That's when the real nightmare began. After her death, strange things started happening in the ward. Every night, without fail, a call bell from her former bed would ring over and over again. At first, we thought it was a wiring issue, so we cut the power, but it kept ringing. We removed the call bell system entirely from her bed. It still rang, and the display always showed the same number, her bed number. Then came the sightings. Several of us, including myself, saw her sitting on her old bed, standing in the corner of the ward, wearing the same red dress, and always with her head lowered, her long black hair obscuring her face. But it didn't stop there. One night, a patient in room 2 woke up screaming. We rushed in to find him drenched in sweat, wide-eyed and shaking. He said, "She came into my dream. She came into my dream. The woman in red, she looked restless, angry." We tried to calm him down, telling him it was just a dream. But soon, other patients began saying the same thing. They saw a woman in red standing beside their beds. Some even claimed she spoke to them. Still, we tried to rationalize it. Sleep paralysis, shared delusions. Maybe it was just fear playing tricks. But the final straw was the growling. Every night, between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., we would hear what sounded like someone or something growling in rage. It was low at first, then loud, so loud that it echoed down the hallways. None of us dared patrol the ward alone anymore. But one night, I don't know what got into me, but I peeked into her old room. There she was, facing the wall, knees to her chest, rocking slowly, whispering. Her red dress unmoving, yet swaying as if something invisible breathed beneath it. We shut the door and never opened it again. Whatever she was in life, she never truly left. So if you ever work in hospital and you come across a quiet patient in red who talks to herself and hides harmony in her pillow, don't disturb her things. You may not like what follows. And that wraps up tonight's double dose of dread. Whether it's a floating spirit at 3 a.m. or a restless soul still haunting a hospital bed, the lady in red seems to have one thing in common. She never leaves quietly. Well, fellow listeners, if you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share this episode with someone who dares to sleep with the lights off. Have a creepy story of your own? Send it in. You might hear your tale in an upcoming episode. Well, this is Creepy with Coffee, where we sip, scream, and survive. Until the next time, sleep tight, and remember, and don't answer if someone in red wakes you up at 3 a.m. Good night, fellow creeps.